Racing season is finally over for the 244 GTK, which means we are finally going to throw a bunch of time at the F40 project over the next few months, and we're kicking it off in this episode with what I feel is a whole lot of progress because we finally have our V12 mock-up engine in the car. It's on the table, it's where it's supposed to be, and with it comes a whole lot of constraints we got to figure out. In this episode, I want to get an X in the main hoop, and we've done it, but it's complicated because the engine is actually inside the cabin with me. That's how little room there is. We're also designing some crazy complicated door bars so you can get in and out of this car. But with all of that means we are closing in on a halfway point for a lot of the major tube work on this thing. Progress is finally happening. I'm excited to show you guys everything we've gotten done over the past couple weeks. So let's get to it. We are starting off with a bang because our mock-up V12 is officially in the F40. Getting the engine in here was not easy. We talked about how to do it. At first I said, oh, let's go through the door, and we realized there's a lot of risk of trying to bring it over the top of this like flange, and if we broke one of these panels are not cheap. Didn't want to do that. You might be thinking, hey, just pull the rear clamshell off and then put the thing in, but the way that we have the whole body mocked up right now, it does not come apart easily. I don't want to do that. That's going to be a nightmare. So we actually dropped the engine in through the rear glass of this thing. Thankfully, it's not in place. It was a tight fit. It clears the front and back of it by like an inch. So we used the gantry, lowered it into place, dragged it forward, and now it's resting more or less in its final resting place. This is where the engine needs to be, and that brings us to one very important problem, and that's that the engine protrudes through the face of the main hoop. The problem at hand is that this V12 is a very long engine, 6 cylinders long. It's not small. It has to be far enough forward for our transaxle that's going to bolt to the back of it to have those rear axles kind of lined up with the center of the back wheels. The axles will actually angle forward ever so slightly, but we can't go too far back. Axle angles will get weird. We can't go too far forward because there's got to be room for me and a passenger up front. So getting this engine positioned is kind of quite delicate and specific. I really need it as far back as it can go without messing up our axle center line. And unfortunately, that means that it has to come through the face of this main hoop. It's a really atypical problem. I have not seen any other cars that have this issue online, but I think that's part of what we get for dealing with a predefined car shape. We're not designing our own car. We have to make it fit within the confines of an F40 body, and not changing the wheelbase and using an engine that's pre-configured. Like, this isn't kind of how this was supposed to be. It wasn't ever meant to have a V12 in here. It's been done. There is another V12 F40 out there. It's a different V12. So we're not reinventing the wheel, but we do have some interesting things we got to work within, some interesting parameters. And that means our main hoop, the bracing that needs to go in here, arguably the most important tubes in the whole car from a kind of overall crash structure standpoint. Normally we'd have an X that goes from our A-pillar bars down to the corners. You know, it'd run right through where the engine is. They can't be there. And I've spent a lot of time trying to figure out what to do. So let's get some tape. I'm going to show you kind of some of the ideas that I've got and then see where we land. I've put a lot of time into this. I'm not really happy with any of the solutions, but sometimes you got to work with what you got. And I think I have an idea that should work reasonably well. So I toyed with a bunch of different ideas on realistically just what to do with this main hoop. And the first idea was an inverted V. And you guys probably saw some of that in the previous episodes because I had one of the tubes mocked up. And the reason for that is it allowed me to brace to the corners at the bottom. And if we did a V in the roof, which is somewhat typical, it would tie into that. But what I couldn't get on board with was that it left these outside corners completely unsupported. And there's so much of the chassis that ties into those corners, which means in some ways they don't need all the extra support, but in many ways it's kind of such an anchor point for so many things that I didn't want these outside corners, especially if my head is going to be here, to be unsupported if the worst happens. So I've gone back to the drawing board, and while I don't absolutely adore the idea, I think where we're gonna wind up is what I'm calling a shallow X. And that means terminating this X, which is pretty traditional, above the bottom of the chassis. So instead of down here, we're about 8 inches up. And there's trade-offs to that. One, we get a full traditional X, and then of course we need to add in our belt bar. So we'll add that in real quick too. It's a little on the low side. It's probably slightly lower than it will be, but who's counting right now? We're visualizing. So this is more in line with what we're gonna have. And while these are terminated high, I think that we can make up for that by one, having one of our door bars tied into that point instead of down at the bottom. We're gonna have a rear chassis leg tied into it to reinforce it. And we can also probably do like a really cool kind of sheet metal gusset that comes in and really reinforces this joint so that I don't have to worry about it. I think overall this is gonna be totally fine, quite structural. It allows the engine to cross through the plane of the main hoop. If I'm careful with it, hopefully we'll have enough room to get a valve cover off. If not, we'll figure it out. In terms of how I want to drop the engine out of this thing, primarily I want it to be able to go right out the back of the car. I think in an ideal world it would be nice if it could drop down out of the bottom of it too, but this is really wide. That means having really wide chassis legs on it, and I don't know if I want them that far apart. So I'm gonna experiment with that as we move forward. But for now, the plan is engine goes straight out the back. Probably has some sort of kind of mounting cradle, unbolt it, engine and gearbox slide straight out the back. You just lift the rear clamshell, pull the rear kind of valance off of it, and it all just goes out. That's the hope. So it should still be serviceable, much more so than the 244 GTK. I think that this works pretty well from a structural standpoint. Unfortunately, we just kind of have to make some sacrifices. We can't have a full traditional X that meets down here at the bottom because the engine's in the way. So I think we ought to build this, put it in the car, see how it looks, see how we feel about it. Yeah, there's a little bit of an art to it sometimes. Just got to kind of see how it's working. So I like this more than I like the inverted V. It makes more sense to me. Let's give it a shot. So with that, we've got our main X in place. It's got a little bit of room to the engine, not a ton. Probably would be better to have more, but ultimately, I don't want these to be even higher up on the main hoop. That just doesn't make sense to me, so we're kind of compromising in different places. But overall, I like it. We got the center of the X dead center in the car. Our gaps are all pretty good. We're just gonna leave it clamped into place for now. We do have to go in and weld underneath every tube before it actually gets tacked into place. So I've got a lot of welding ahead of me. Same thing with the front. We got a lot of welding to do before anything actually gets affixed. With this done, we should talk about a belt bar, but I want the seats before I really decide on where that's gonna go. Although I might go on and take some measurements off of the 308 because the cabin of the 308, the 244, is exactly the same. I can take some dimensions off of our seats and kind of figure out roughly where I want the belt bar to go. Because the upper part of the belt bar, we're gonna tie into a door bar, and we've got 4 points that we need to tie in. We wanna tie in where the belt bar goes, we wanna tie in the bottom of our X, the bottom of the A-pillar, and then the dash bar. And normally, instead of here, you would be tying in down at the bottom of the main hoop because those are one and the same, but we're mixing and matching and modifying. Again, I think a nice gusset in here will work really well, so we'll come up with something. Let's lay out some tape, figure out what we want for a door bar that's going to tie in those 4 points, and it also needs to make sure that ingress and egress from the car is easy. I don't want it to be the same thing as the 244. It's a nightmare to get in and out of, and given that I do actually want to drive this car and I want it to be streetable, the door bar needs to be something that you can get past, not easily, but without a huge headache. Now, first, I want to at least talk about what a normal door bar would look like and how it would sit. And if we were just building this with normal constraints, this is exactly how the door bar would get built. It would be 1 point up at the dash bar, one at the bottom of the A-pillar, bottom of the main hoop, and then one where the belt bar goes. You can see that here. And this would work, but there are 2 issues with this at the moment. One is that once there's also an FIA bar in here, once there's an FIA bar in here, it's going to be really hard to get in and out of. It will be just as hard as the 244 because this is exactly how the 244 is built, and it's not easy to get into. Now, on top of that, the bigger issue that I have is that leaves our main hoop X terminating here in what would be considered a completely dead node. And I don't want that. If this thing were to flip over in some hugely catastrophic crash and there's a huge load from the top of the car, this is going to just be able to punch the main hoop outwards and it can begin to compress. If it fractured, so to speak, the middle of that X, the hoop can spread out. It's not as strong. There's nothing reinforcing this joint, and this is an important one. Is it as important as down here? In my opinion, more important. The floor, so to speak, if you can kind of understand what I mean, it's just going along for the ride with the car in some sense in comparison to the crash structure of the car. So what I want to do is we're going to eliminate this setup. I want to do something that, again, meets this position and also ties in our other important points. So let's scrap this now that we know what we're not doing and try to figure out something somewhat elegant that's going to work. Now, I'll be honest, this is probably like the 10th door bar that I've taped out. We shortcut that a little bit when in editing, but this is what I'm landing on. I don't know that I love it yet. I'm gonna build it and then decide. But here's my logic. I want door bars in the car for obvious reasons. It needs it for a lot of strength, chassis rigidity, safety, etc. But what I can't do is a normal door bar setup, and so alternatively, this lower bar is going to be straight. I think that's going to be a worthwhile kind of compensation for the fact that normally the lower bar would be bent. We would do a bent upper bar and a bent lower bar, meet them in the middle, and then gusset it. By having this bar be straight, we're going to add a lot of rigidity to it. It's going to be really strong on the longitudinal axis. If there were some form of, let's say, front end or rear end collision. And then the upper bar is going to get bent. We've got it meeting roughly where the belt's going to be, and then of course the dash bar. And I've got a really wide base to it, so it's technically 2 bends, so that we can get in and out of the car. Right here we've got our what's called an FIA bar representation, roughly. That's a decent opening to get into. Is it going to be easy to get in? No. Does it need an FIA bar? No, but I want an FIA bar, so it's getting an FIA bar. But I think that this opening, it is a lot bigger than the 244. It's going to work a lot better. It should. I mean, this shape here is what's in an F40 already. You have a tube covered by a carbon cap on the original chassis. So really, we're just kind of adding stuff in the way here. I think that that's dodgeable. It's not going to have a containment seat like the 244. It's just going to have fixed back bucket seats. So I think it's going to work. I want to build this, see how it sits. We're going to kind of repeat the process that we've been doing for our other bent bars. So I'm going to use the bend protractor, which you guys have been asking. This one's from Mittler Brothers. You got to make sure that you get one for the right tubing size, center line radius, all that kind of stuff. This one's paired to our bender. Let's get some measurements taken, figure out exactly what this needs to be, and then start bending some stuff up. We'll go on and start with the straight tube on the bottom. That one needs to go in first. It's going to be a lot easier. And then, yeah, we'll bend up the top. Hopefully we can knock out all 4 of these in this episode. I feel somewhat good about it if it doesn't go awry, and if I like it. So now I need to clean the rust off of these tubes because, well, as we've talked about, everything in this shop is rusting like crazy, including all of this Docal RA tubing that's been sitting under the Audi. And I figured I might as well do it at the end. I might change that order of operations later. But I bought a tube polisher exactly for this because running Scotch-Brite up and down this thing is just, it's a huge pain. It takes so much work, and especially with as corroded as some of the stuff is, this makes quick work of it. It's gonna get it nice and clean for welding. It's the right tool for the job. We've got just kind of a Scotch-Brite belt on it, so really just electrifying the process. This tool works pretty well. I will say that like having to rotate the tube by hand and hold the whole thing with one arm and get the whole job done is a bit of a workout, but I'm sure there's probably a better way to do it. I don't know what that is yet, but another tool for the shop. I'm liking it so far. Got my laser running here so I can figure out exactly where it needs to be. And I think we're there. And I need to do a little bit of massaging. I think maybe if we kind of, I'll massage it a little bit. I don't want to like spend too much time and get this perfect yet because as everything gets welded together, things are going to move some. So I think we're in the noise. I think that looks, I mean, this whole gap is weldable as it is, and then it's still going to get gusseted. So I think we're good. I think probably a little bit of massaging here, make sure those are in plane. This looks good down here. I'm happy with that. I think that looks pretty good. All clear here. All right, one door bar down. Now the sucky part is to do it all a second time and make it exactly the same. This is gonna suck. This is gonna suck a lot. Now for this upper door bar, there's a few things that are gonna make it challenging to get right because we need both ends of it to node with our tubes. One end's got to be perfectly in plane with the dash bar, and the other has to be perfectly in plane with the belt bar. And last but not least, I also want it to touch for the entire length of the midsection. I want it to touch the lower door bar so that we can weld them together down their length. I think it'll look really nice. It will be really strong. And I think it's kind of a trick way to accomplish these door bars. It will make it more meaningful than just doing kind of an X like we have in the main hoop. It's not going to be easy to do. It's going to require a lot of finessing it, and I think getting both sides to do it might be a huge challenge, but this is one of those things that I think will be worth putting the time into, and if I try enough times, I think we can get it exactly right. Now, getting this second side done, and I think that it's finally done, has been a little bit of a nightmare, if I'm being honest. This was a real challenge because getting both of these to line up at the exact same point on each side is one thing. That in and of itself, not a huge deal. But then to also make sure that the lower plane of this tube lands and more or less contacts the lower tube during that flat segment, that's 3 points of contact and one of them has to be a plane. It means like there's a lot of precision here. I had to do this a couple times, and looking at it, I mean, it's within like a fraction of a degree, and once I kind of tweak on it a little bit, apply some pressure, it does make contact. We'll weld it all the way across, we'll cap it, do a gusset, but I got to start doing some welding on a lot of this stuff, and I think that's what the next episode is going to be, because right now, every single tube on this car, minus those front kind of diagonals, it's all just sitting together. There's a couple of clamps holding stuff, but it's all just kind of like a tension fit. So everything's got to come back apart. As I said earlier, we got to weld underneath each joint before the next tube goes in. So things like this lower tube have to go in after this gets welded and things like that. So all these need to get welded before the upper bar goes in. I'll also probably wait to weld the door bars in until we're further along in the process, just because it's going to make it so tough to get in and out of the car. But I think these are done. I think I like them. I did mock up the seat from the 308, which is not the correct seat for this car, but there's room. It's going to get kind of funky in here. We're going to talk about seating position in a later episode. There's not a lot of room in here. The seat like literally essentially touches the engine. There's going to be a thin firewall here, and that's about it. Feet are going to go they're going to kind of go into that front cavity. I got to make sure that there's room for the wheels to turn and everything. I might actually kind of redesign these tubes to give myself a bit more room. It's going to get tricky. It's going to get complicated. This is a tight squeeze. This is a tight fit. But steady progress. I'm happy with these. We've got a few more tubes to go. Let me grab one really quick. I'll show you guys what I'm thinking about getting done next. So one of the next tubes that we're going to do is going to be called an FIA bar. And let me move this clamp that we also don't need anymore. We talked about this one earlier too, so forgive me if I'm repeating myself. But this is going to join in down here. We'll rest it there for the time being. And kind of come up here. In some cases, you'd run it right up here to the corner. We need headroom. We need to make sure that a helmet is going to clear any roof bars. So we're probably going to run a shallow X and then gusset in the corner, just like the 308, and land this tube a bit more forward. And that's also going to give a little bit more room to get into the car. But that's roughly what we're looking at. So if we kind of clamp this guy into place, maybe, if it'll stay. How about that? That's roughly where that's going to go. It'll land right here on that joint. We'll do one on each side. And that is our opening to get into the car. So we're going to get these done. In order to do these, we got to get the roof done. So that's going to be the next episode. We're going to do a curved bar up at the top, an X across, and then probably some diagonals that will meet from the roof bar down to the FIA bar. And with that, that'll be most of the structure that goes in here. We still need to do a belt bar that's gonna run across from this point over. I kind of finalized belt bar positioning when I had the other seat in here. That should be good too. I know I'm doing a lot of explaining, but you said that's what you guys want, so that's what we're doing. We'll get a belt bar in, and then from that point, hopefully here in another couple weeks, I will take the time. I got to design these same front suspension jigs for the rear. We'll get those ordered from our friends at Send Cut Send, get those in place, and start some of the rear tube work. And that will mean we're really starting to have some semblance of a chassis. So a lot of stuff we got to do here on the floor, lots of square tube or rectangular flat tube to go in to support things like the seats, build kind of a center tunnel that will be in there. Obviously there's no drive shaft, but we want to run coolant tubes, things like that through the car, fuel lines, etc. Have them nice and protected. And there needs to be a center structure in the car to help with overall like torsional rigidity and longitudinal rigidity. So that'll do a lot for the kind of overall stiffness of the car. Anyways, that's enough explaining. We got a long list to go. Clearly there's an entire car left to build. So we're going to wrap it up there. Hope you guys enjoyed this one. I'm really happy with the progress. These look really good in there. The X looks good. Having the engine in place really gives me the ability to start visualizing where a lot of stuff's going to go. And there's, as I said, a lot of car left to build, but these steps are all important ones. So we'll see you guys in the next one. Hopefully here in a couple weeks, we'll have another episode ready to come out. We've got some adventures from Connecticut at Lime Rock Park and Laguna Seca in the 244. As I mentioned in the beginning of the episode, we blew our transmission up, so it's been a little bit of a nightmare. If you're not wanting to hear a horror story, just skip that one. But otherwise, we'll catch you guys in the next F40 episode. Thanks as always for the support. Oh, and last minute plug, we've got merchandise coming here in probably 2 weeks, so if you're not on Patreon, you're going to want to be. They're going to get first access to it, all of our Discord subscribers. It's the way to get the merch before it sells out. Otherwise, keep an eye out for an episode here in a couple weeks, probably the next F40 episode. Everything sells out usually within 24 to 48 hours, so be ready for it.